In the north, Israel is absorbing hundreds of rockets from Hezbollah-controlled Lebanon a day. We have reached a breaking point. So what's the administration's move in all of this? Oh, work with the Israeli left to bring down the government. I'll have all the details coming up on In Focus. We've reached a breaking point. Every day for the past week, Israeli citizens in the north have been absorbing anywhere between 40 and 140 incoming missiles and rockets every single day. This is a situation that's untenable, and it can't go on. It simply can't go on. We have 80,000 internal refugees who left their border communities from the north back in October, and slowly but surely, you see more and more refugees from the north leaving because they just can't keep going this way. Kids are supposed to be going to school, and every day they're worried if they get on their school buses that they're going to be bombed on their way to school. This morning, and that's not the only front, of course. I mean, they burned a swath in the forests around Safed last week. And then, the north is only one front. Right now it's becoming the worst front. But this morning, residents of central Israel were awoken by an air raid siren at 6:30 in the morning. And we're not quite sure what the ballistic missile was that came and attacked Israel from Yemen. The Houthis claim that it was a hypersonic missile, which is, great. It's supposed to be the high technology that only the Russians and the Chinese and maybe the Americans have finally accomplished that they have. All right. But now it works out that Russia or China is giving these sub-nuclear missiles that are capable of flying at hypersonic speed and evading every single interception device known to man, including all the ones that Israel fields. The Houthis claim that they sent a hypersonic rocket to central Israel 11 minutes before it landed. So if that's true, it's a changed game. It's a game changer. It's a changed game. And Israel didn't intercept it. So it's not really clear what happened this morning, but it wasn't good. It wasn't good. It was a sign that things are getting worse, not better, right? And in Gaza, we're playing a suckers game. We say we need to control the Philadelphia corridor, which is true, but the fact of the matter is the only way that you can control the Philadelphia corridor, which controls the 14-kilometer swath that controls Gaza's international border with Egypt, is if you control the city of Rafah. In other words, there is no sort of, okay, we can leave all of Gaza and just remain on the international border, because that means that you're leaving our soldiers as sitting ducks in the middle of enemy territory, and that's just not going to work. That kind of deployment of IDF forces is doomed to failure, because the parents of soldiers killed while being sitting ducks along the border with Egypt aren't going to stand for it, and the public won't stand for it for long. So it's not going to work. The only way that we can keep the border zone with Gaza is if we keep the city of Rafah. And if we keep the city of Rafah, then we might as well just keep total military control over Gaza. And in fact, that's exactly what we need to do. We can't transfer it to anybody else. The only way that you win in Gaza is by controlling Gaza. This is something that the Palestinians have made completely clear, both in Gaza and, of course, in Judea and Samaria. Every square inch of territory that we hand over to the Palestinian Authority gets gobbled up and transformed into a terrorist launching site. Okay, that's all. They haven't built anything except the biggest terrorism bases known to mankind outside of Afghanistan. That's what they do with all the territory that they're given. If we don't want to be attacked from the territory that the Palestinians are located in, then we have to control that territory, because that's all they do with the territory. So that's Gaza. Right? And then, of course, we have Iran. And Iran is the head of this. They're the head of the octopus, the head of the snake, whatever you want to call it. They're the ones directing all of the fronts. Everybody is acting for Iran, at Iran's direction, and they're like the emperor hiding behind the screen, or even worse. I mean, they're holding the Charlie McCarthy doll, and sometimes the Charlie McCarthy doll is dressed up as Hamas, sometimes as Hezbollah, sometimes as the Houthis, sometimes as all three, sometimes as the Shiite militias in Iraq or in Syria. Sometimes they're dressed up as Bashar al-Assad. But it's all the same Charlie McCarthy doll. They're all Charlie McCarthy dolls that are controlled by the ventriloquist named Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran. And they're rushing, across the nuclear finish line. Now, the Americans are saying, look, it's Russia. The Russians are helping the Iranians cross the nuclear finish line. It's possible. Now, we have to pay attention to the fact that Russia has been building the nuclear reactor at Bushehr for the past 25 years, and somehow or another it never gets completed. In other words, to date, Russia hasn't really helped Iran with its nuclear weapons program the way that it's been touted to do. They've sold them these S-300 anti-aircraft batteries that are good, but they're not as good as this S-400. And so far, the Russians have promised the Iranians the S-400s for years, and it's never shown up in Tehran. They could show up tomorrow. We don't know. It's possible. Anything's possible. But the fact of the matter is, maybe that's what the Russians are doing. Maybe the Russians have decided that the time has come for them to give Iran the nuclear bomb. It's possible. But it's also possible that what we're seeing from Washington is an effort to use the alleged Russian collusion with Iran, or the sudden stepped-up Russian collusion with Iran's nuclear weapons program, as a means to then say, oh, what we really need now is a new nuclear deal, a redux of Obama's nuclear deal from 2015 that got Iran to the brink of a nuclear arsenal. And now President Biden, in his final days in office or months in office, he's going to get them through across the finish line with a new nuclear deal that they're going to tout as, the Deus ex machina that's going to come down from the sky and save the day at the last moment. Of course, they're not. What they're going to do is delay Iran coming out and saying that they have a nuclear arsenal until after, say, Kamala Harris is safely ensconced in office, in the Oval Office on January 21st, 2025. So that's the kind of thing that the Americans are pushing for right now. And that brings me to the crux of what I wanted to talk to you about. So, we talked last week about what Kamala Harris said at the presidential debate. And what she essentially said, or what she very clearly said, was that she only accepts that Israel has the right to intercept missiles en route to Israel, nothing else. Right? Israel can't take any offensive action against any of its enemies, not the Palestinians, not the Iranians, not the Lebanese, not the Yemenites, not the Syrians, none of them. Nobody should be placed at risk by Israel. All Israel is allowed to do is catch the missiles en route to Israel if we can, and if we can't, like happened this morning with the supposed hypersonic missile that the Houthis, anyway, whatever the missile was that the Houthis shot over towards Tel Aviv. Tough luck, you win some, you lose some, but you're not allowed to actually take any offensive action against them. And in the meantime, what the United States wants, they have a singular devotion to reaching a total ceasefire that will leave Hezbollah on the border capable of attacking Israel with as many missiles as they want, whenever they want. It will leave Hamas in power in Gaza, right? And it will leave the Houthis in power in Yemen. Again, all of these things, and most importantly, it's going to protect the Iranian regime as they continue on with their nuclear progress. That's what the Americans want. That's what they want before the election on November 5th, and that is what they will want after the election on November 5th, because that's what the Americans have wanted, at least since Obama took the oath of office for the first time in January 2009. That's been the policy of the Democratic Party since Obama became the president of the United States. And that's what they're gunning for. So how are they planning on accomplishing this? Israel is looking at this situation again. And, everybody is saying, opposition leaders are saying it to try to convince us that they're hardliners and that we should allow them into the government. I'll get to that in a second. But Benny Gantz is trying to sound more hawkish than Prime Minister Netanyahu. He's not doing a very good job, but he's trying. And, everybody's going and meeting with all the heads of the local councils in the north that are all just, their communities are getting blown up every day by dozens and dozens of rockets and missiles. So everybody's coming and talking to them, and everybody says it's not going to continue. The Prime Minister said it this morning at the government meeting that it's not going to continue. It won't continue. It's not going to continue. The security situation on the northern border is not going to prevail for much longer. We're going to push away Hezbollah from the border. We're going to undermine their capacity. We're going to take away their capacity to destroy life in northern Israel. we'll see. But that's what everybody is saying. And everybody understands that the countdown has begun to the big front, the big war, the major front that we haven't gone to since October 7th, because the United States has said, absolutely not, you're not allowed to take any offensive action in Lebanon beyond airstrikes, right? And also don't attack in Beirut, right? And so the Americans have been pushing this line since October 7th. You can't go after Lebanon. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do the other thing. And it's reached a breaking point. Either we defy the Americans or we live with a situation where northern Israel is Hezbollah's security zone. And in the meantime, Hezbollah's plans are very clear. They want to invade Israel. They want to take over Nahariya, which they've been attacking on a daily basis. This is a town that has, about 7,000 people who live there. They want to take over Shlomi, another town with about the same number of people, use the residents as human shields, and then go forward into the rest of Israel and conquer the Galilee. That's their plan. They published it for the first time in November, I think in 2018. So, what are we talking about? They have their plan. They intend to execute it. They're executing it bit by bit now by taking out all of these Air Force air control bases in the north and other strategic sites in the north that belong to the IDF, or severely damaging them, right? Putting Israel in constant defense, including defending our own bases in northern Israel, not to mention all of the communities that are becoming uninhabitable, not only the ones that haven't been inhabited since mid-October, but all the rest of them. So, that's the game we're playing. Either we take the initiative and we move on South Lebanon and on Hezbollah, or, we accept a fate where an entire area of Israel has become unfit for human habitation, or animal habitation, by the way. They're destroying the landscape as well. So, either if we don't want to accept the fate that we're giving up the Galilee, then we have to take action in Lebanon against Hezbollah, which, of course, controls the Lebanese government, as I've said on numerous occasions, and also the Lebanese army, as I've said on numerous occasions. That same army, of course, is paid for, armed, and trained by the U.S. All the same, because it's, as what my friend Tony Badran from Tablet calls an American equity. The Americans say you can't go after the Lebanese military, you can't go after the Lebanese government, you can't go after Lebanese infrastructure, you can only go after Hezbollah. But it's all one thing. It's all the same thing. And that's one of the American ways to prevent Israel from taking any action in Lebanon. And it's not because they have sentiments towards Lebanon per se. It's because they want to protect their Iran first Middle East policy. And since Lebanon is controlled by Iran, is what Obama referred to as an Iranian equity, the Americans don't want Israel to do anything against Lebanon. It doesn't matter that northern Israel is absorbing, between, I think it was 40 yesterday, it was 100 on Friday, and today it's Sunday. Who knows how many are going to land by the end of the day? It's insane. So that's where we are. So the Americans don't want us to actually take any offensive action, not in Lebanon, not in Gaza, not anywhere. They want a ceasefire in Gaza. It's okay if it's on Hamas's terms. And, in Lebanon, no, you just got to suck it up and get to a deal. We're going to have Amos Hochstein coming here, I think, later this week to tell us that we have to capitulate to Hezbollah's demands, which are Hamas's demands, which are total capitulation, leave them, poison our border, to massacre our people any old time they want. Okay, that's where we are. And to this end, we're seeing very close coordination between the messaging of Hamas and the United States and the Israeli left. So first, I want to show you the close coordination between Hamas's messaging, which is total Israeli capitulation, and what we're seeing on the streets of Tel Aviv. So here, for instance, we see what happened at Saturday night's rally in Tel Aviv. They have this huge sign, and it was probably like 3 stories high or something like that, that's going across the crowd on the street in Tel Aviv. And what does it say? It says, "Get out of Gaza, letsat mi'aza," which we have to withdraw from Gaza, and then it says, so that everybody will go back home. Now, who is the organization that's doing this? There's an organization behind it, and my friend Gilad Zvik was able to get all the information on it. It's called Standing Together. Standing Together is an organization that was established in 2017 with funding from the New Israel Fund and from the German government. And what they do is they push for a total Israeli pullout of Judea and Samaria, ending the occupation and all of the rest of it. And since the beginning of the war with Hamas, they've been pushing for Israel to essentially not fight and to just capitulate. So here they are, and now they've apparently been mainstreamed, right? Because their messaging, which is paid for by foreign people, by foreign government, by the German government, by the New Israel Fund, by whatever, they are now mainstream. This is the main message in Kaplan Street for the people, and this is pure Hamas propaganda. Their line that Israel has to withdraw completely from Gaza in order for everybody to go home is the line being pushed by Iran and its proxies, that the people in the north will be able to go home under Iran's security umbrella, not under Israel's security umbrella, the IDF, right? With Hezbollah planning to massacre thousands and thousands of Israelis and seize control over the Galilee whenever they get the note from Tehran that they're supposed to remain poised at our border. Gaza is supposed to be rebuilt with American tax dollars under Hamas control. And Israel is supposed to again be in a situation where we're waiting to be invaded yet again. And, it'll also come from Judea and Samaria, which Iran is lighting up, and from within the Israeli Arab sector, which Iran is trying to incite as well. So all of this is going on, and you have here is the Israeli left. But the Israeli left isn't only coordinating its messages with Hamas. It's also coordinating its messages, and first and foremost, coordinating its messages with the White House, with the Biden administration. The person who at least is presenting himself as a conduit for coordination between the Israeli left's rioters or demonstrators or whatever you want to call it and the administration is a man named Ami Dror. He's one of the heads of the self-declared Kaplan brigades who are running the show. First, it was for democracy to try to block the legal reform to restore control or balance of power between Israel's elected leadership and our official, and our deep state, which controls most of the reins of power through the legal fraternity back last year. So last year, it was for democracy. And this year, they changed their slogan, and now they're all supposed to be calling for bringing the hostages home. Okay, that's been their calling card since they were directed to adopt it by the U.S. administration, according to Ami Dror, on March 6th. And on March 6th, he sent out a communique on X. He's not trying to hide any of this, to his fellow anarchists, explaining that the United States, the administration, the Biden-Harris administration, had set out a 4-point plan for ousting the government from power in order to get to a ceasefire that they were coordinating with the people on the street, with the left-wing elites who are running the demonstrations to bring down the government. So this was back in April. They had a 4-point plan. I wrote about it in an article you can look up on JNS called The Biden Administration's War Against the Government of Israel. And so I have the whole post from X that he posted at that time printed out there. Now he has a new X post where he talks about his current trip to the United States. It was dated September 10th, and it's an important. And I got it from the same Twitter feed. Arbelu, the tuna hunter, and Arbel and I have become buddies, and so he sent it to me to make sure that I saw it. And what we've seen actually over the past several weeks that preceded Ami Dror's trip to Washington is that in the feed of the Kaplan brigades, and there were internal WhatsApp groups, they keep talking about working with the United States to get more and different people in Israel, more and different Israelis sanctioned by the U.S. You'll recall that on February 1st, Joe Biden put out this executive order that made it possible for the U.S. government to start sanctioning Israeli citizens who have not been accused of any crime, have not carried out any crime, are acting in a fully lawful manner. But from the American perspective, they should be sanctioned because they're undermining the Biden administration's plan to curtail an Israeli victory in Gaza and to force Israel to capitulate and stop asserting its security authority over the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria and stop providing legal protections to the 500,000 plus Jews, Israeli citizens all, who live in Judea and Samaria. So that's the purpose of the executive order. It's to make it impossible for both the Israeli government Israeli authorities, Israeli citizens, to act in a way that undermines the Biden administration's Middle East policy of empowering Iran, or in this case, a Palestinian proxy, at the expense of Israel. And to this end, they also have been working steadily with the Israeli left to try to force the government to either capitulate to the Biden administration's policies or to be replaced by a government that, if not led by the left, as in they can't actually oust Netanyahu, that they break up his coalition, bring in Benny Gantz and others who are going to be acting as surrogates for the Americans and blocking the government from making any decisions regarding the war that could actually, God forbid, lead to an Israeli victory. So that's where they've been really throughout the war, and that's where they remain today. And so I just want to read to you what Amidor's new missive is. And by the way, you should just know, before he put this out on May 10th, he had another one out where he announced that the Prime Minister's son is getting married next month. He gave the name of the hall where he's getting married and the day that he's getting married, and he told everybody to show up and bust it up and to make it impossible for anybody to enjoy themselves, least of all the couple that's getting married. So he is, I mean, this was actually, I believe, national security crime, because he's essentially saying, you know, he's giving Israel's enemies coordinates. So, you know, it's very, very terrifying that they're doing this, but they're completely out of control. So the same Amidor that was acting in this way, was carrying out a national security crime, he wrote a new missive. And in his new missive, he writes this, and I'm just going to read it to you. I translated it to English. He wrote it in Hebrew. You can look at the Twitter thing on the screen in Hebrew, and this is what he says. Updates from the U.S. I'm here for a short trip. And then he says, number one, the video of the Hamas tunnel shocked administration officials. Quote, this is 100% because of the cowardly prime minister, is the angry response I received from someone a few moments ago. So he's at the White House. Presumably that's where he was last time. That's what he claimed anyway. And the Americans are looking at the footage of the tunnel where the 6 hostages were executed by Hamas. And like the people on the street in Israel who are coordinated with them, they're saying that it's Netanyahu's fault, that Netanyahu is responsible for their execution because he won't accept a ceasefire deal. What is a ceasefire deal? And as I laid out, total Israeli capitulation to Hamas. And so that's number one. Number two, he starts talking about the arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court in The Hague that's supposed to be released against Prime Minister Netanyahu, Defense Minister Gallant, in sort of as the first stage imminently. So what does he say here too? The arrest warrant for Netanyahu from The Hague, the Americans aren't dealing with it anymore. It's a European issue, and therefore the question is just when the arrest warrant is issued and to which ranks it will widen after Netanyahu. And again, here, you know, what we've been talking about all along is that the purpose of going after Netanyahu is to get the idea of treating Israelis as war criminalized, normalized. You use Netanyahu because he's been so demonized in the Western media and, of course, at home in Israel by the left, by our media, that, you know, people, that'll go down relatively smoothly. Not, but whatever. That's the thinking. And then what can they do? They can go after lower-ranking officials, meaning generals, meaning division, you know, major generals, division commanders, or brigadier generals. Go after brigade commanders, colonels, and go down the line. You can go after line soldiers. We talked about this in the past as well. The United States is fishing information from reservists who apply for entry visas to the U.S., and they demand granular accounting for all the military operations that they took part in during their service in the war in Gaza. So they're conducting fishing operations with the obvious intent of actually going after our reservists or our regular soldiers when they get out of the army in the future. This is building up a database. And here what he's saying is that they're planning on, the ICC is planning on expanding their international arrest warrants, not only against Prime Minister Netanyahu, Defense Minister Gallant, but going after our soldiers and our officers in the future stage. The third thing, he starts talking about what is Biden planning on doing as a parting hit against Netanyahu, right? Because that's, you know, they're waiting for the revenge, right? They're waiting for the revenge. He was supposed to be overthrown after October 7th. He was supposed to be overthrown by the riots before October 7th. He wasn't. October 7th came. That was definitely supposed to do him in. And the And the damn Netanyahu, he just keeps surviving. He keeps surviving and demanding victory in the war and forcing the army to fight well past where they wanted to go, and he keeps pushing and he pushes and pushes, and he's not getting ousted from power. So Biden wants what Amidor refers to as a scorpion bite, to finally, get the kill shot on Netanyahu. What's that supposed to be? Again, to oust him from power or to force him to become subservient to the left. So Biden's scorpion bite, Amidor writes, may happen even before the elections. Would make sense, because why shouldn't it? He's already lame duck. It will be first and foremost against the Kahanists. Let's remember, who are the Kahanists? Meir Kahana, he was a member of Knesset in the 1980s. He was assassinated by a jihadist in New York City in 1990, and he called for the expulsion of the Arabs. Right? They called for the annihilation of the Jews. He called for the expulsion of the Arabs, and therefore he was labeled as a racist, a war criminal, whatever, by whomever. And then when he was assassinated by a jihadist, somebody was actually a part of the cell that ended up carrying out the 1993 World Trade Center bombings. But who cares, right? He got nothing. He didn't even get charged with murder, even though he came into this hotel room in New York and shot Meir Kahana in cold blood. No, it was for the illegal discharge of a firearm. I don't remember what his sentence was, but it was crazy. Not even manslaughter, nothing, right? Because Meir Kahana deserved to die because he had bad ideas in his head. So that's Meir Kahana. So anybody who has ever been aligned with Meir Kahana in any way, said anything nice about him in public, they're automatically labeled a Kahanist. And so the one party in the government that's most identified with Meir Kahana is the Jewish Power Party, led by Police Minister, or I think he's called now the Minister of National Security, Itamar Ben-Gvir. Okay, so they want to oust Itamar Ben-Gvir from power. They've been demonizing him for God knows how long, and so this is what it says: the Biden scorpion bite may happen even before the elections. It will be first and foremost against the Kahanists. Ben-Gvir will be placed on the blacklist together with Jewish Power. So the United States is planning on placing sanctions both on a cabinet minister in the Israeli government, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who was elected by Israeli voters, and his entire political party. They're planning on, and again, we've gone over this in the conversation that I had about the sanctions with Professor Eugene Kontorovich. The sanctions freeze everybody who's been sanctioned, or every entity that's been sanctioned, out of the international banking system. They get all of their bank accounts frozen. They can't operate. They can't make any financial transactions of any kind, including buying gas, including paying mortgage payments, including their kids' after school activities. They can't do anything, neither they nor their spouse nor anybody in their immediate family. Everybody's frozen out of the international banking system. And now what he says, the United States is intending to do this to one of the members of the Israeli cabinet, Itamar Ben-Gvir, and his entire political party. Okay, so that means all the members of Knesset who are on his list, everybody who serves under him, everybody who works for him, right? Everybody who's involved in any way. But that's not all. He said, so, what are they going to justify it for? How are they going to justify it? It will be implemented against Ben-Gvir because he isn't doing his job as a minister. Says who? Says Biden, because what's his job as a minister? To do whatever the United States says. If he doesn't, then he can be sanctioned. I guess that's the point. And so Jewish Power will be sanctioned because Ben-Gvir is the leader. And the most interesting thing, and surprising, says Amidor, it's surprising, is that I heard the administration is considering placing senior officers on the blacklist in a second wave after Ben-Gvir. The claim is similar against them as it is against Ben-Gvir. The claim is similar. The officers aren't enforcing their authority to prevent harm to Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. So again, this is precisely what we were talking about, that the Americans intend to go after military units, after officers, after soldiers. They wanted to go after Netzach Yehuda because that's a brigade that's manned by ultra-Orthodox Israelis that operates primarily in the Jordan Valley, although they were stuck protecting Biden's stupid, failed temporary port in Gaza that slipped into the sea because of winds. And one of them got killed protecting his boondoggle. And the Americans wanted to sanction that entire unit. There was an outcry. It didn't end up happening. but they're poised to go against police officers because they work for Ben Gvir, so they're politicized, so that they're bad, and they're protecting Jews in Judea and Samaria against Palestinians, therefore they're hurting Palestinians, therefore they're bad. Or they refuse to go along with the demonization campaign that the U.S. has been leading against Israelis who protect agricultural land, who are shepherds, who work the ground, who protect state land in Judea and Samaria. They've all been caricatured and demonized by this administration as violent settlers. And the police keep saying that the number of violent settler incidents has gone down by more than 50% since the beginning of 2024. And that's not what the Americans want to hear. So obviously they're not protecting the Palestinians because they are denying the basic foundation of the American operation against the Israelis. And so they may be sanctioned too. So any policeman who doesn't go along with the fiction that there's this concept of violent settler extremism, there's this phenomenon, then it has to be nipped in the bud, or it has to be rooted out, right, by Israeli authorities, they're going to find themselves debanked, right? And obviously they can't go visit Disneyland or whatever because they're not going to be allowed to go into the United States ever again. So that's what the sanctions plan is. They're planning on going after senior police officers who operate in Judea and Samaria. And again, the idea of going after policemen was a brainchild that I saw a few weeks ago already being discussed in the internal WhatsApp groups of the Kaplan Brigade, although they were talking about going after policemen who were arresting them for causing mayhem, for lighting campfires on Ayalon Highway and other things. Anyway, so they're planning on putting the police officers on a blacklist in the second wave after Ben Gvir. And then he says, no one is discussing Smotrich, that's Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, who's the head of the religious Zionism party that ran together with Ben Gvir on a joint list for the Knesset. He says, no one is discussing Smotrich in this connection, which is interesting. And then he said that the Americans are apparently just trying to divide and conquer Smotrich and Ben Gvir to make Smotrich do their bidding, because he is going to be constantly afraid of being blacklisted as well, being sanctioned as well. And then what the Americans assess is going to happen as a result of their sanctions of senior cabinet minister. So it's number 4, the Americans assume that Netanyahu will fire Ben Gvir when the Knesset comes back into session from summer recess. That'll be, I checked, it's going to be at the end of October after the high holy days are over. So they assess that Netanyahu is going to come back from the summer recess, the high holidays, to form a, quote, wide government with Benny Gantz and Gideon Sa'ar. Then Amidor says, I'm skeptical, but that's what they're saying. And then he has the 5th point about Avner Netanyahu's wedding. There was a lot of outcry against what he did among not only the people on the right, but people in his own campus, that how can you do this to somebody? All he wants to do is get married. And he says it's because he's having a nice wedding, and you can't have a nice wedding. If he wanted to elope, just his parents present, I wouldn't bother him. But since he wants to actually have a party for his wedding, no, we have to go and make everybody miserable because, hostages. It doesn't matter that all of these people go out every night to different fancy restaurants in Tel Aviv and yuck it up with one another before and after their anti-government riots in the streets of Tel Aviv. That doesn't matter at all. So, the most important thing is that Netanyahu's son shouldn't be allowed to get married in peace. These people, all that moves them, all that motivates them is incredible hatred. And I should just add here that back when I was writing about what Amidor was doing with the Americans in April, I was looking at it. Arbel was sending me this stuff, and also Channel 14 was reporting it. And Channel 14 actually brought footage from a Zoom conversation that Amidor was having with American progressive Jews. And he was saying there that he wants to be an American colony, that he doesn't think that Israel should be a sovereign state, because the problem with having Israeli sovereignty is that means that the people get to decide which direction we're going to move, and he doesn't want that because the majority of Israelis want to win this war, and a minority of Israelis want to capitulate in order to oust the government from power because they think that they can get power politically by ousting the government and fomenting a defeat in the war. And to that end, they're working as vassals of a hostile administration that's doing everything that it can to undermine our ability to win the war. So this is, and then I just want to show you, I sent it to my team, the headline. I was talking about Yediot Achronot in my conversation with Ron Schleifer last week about political warfare or psychological warfare. and how just as we saw with that, with a big sign, the big banner in the rally at Kaplan Street last night calling for a total withdrawal from Gaza, that this was just Hamas propaganda. So we saw with the headline that I showed last week in my show with Ron Schleifer, that Yediot Ahronot is also using their front page to resonate Hamas propaganda messages against Israel. And today, what we saw in Yediot Ahronot's front page, they're going to have to stop giving away free copies at my post office if they want me to stop attacking them, because I wouldn't see it otherwise, but I pass by my mailbox on my way into Jerusalem, and then I get Yediot. So here's their headline today. And what does it say? It says, "This is how democracies fall." And look at the picture of Itamar Ben-Gvir. That's Itamar Ben-Gvir, the national security minister is in charge of the police. And how is Itamar Ben-Gvir destroying democracy? He's destroying democracy by appointing superintendents of the police. So, the last chief of staff or inspector general or whatever the American equivalent is of the police rankings, like the chief of staff of the police, he finished his tour of duty, and Itamar Ben-Gvir appointed a successor. He actually appointed two, because he appointed one, and the lawyers came in and said he's not allowed, he's not good enough, he won't pass muster. So he had a second candidate who came in and was approved, because the commissars get to decide. So they said no to the first one, they said fine to the second one. As soon as the second one came in, just as happens every time that you get a new chief of police, all of the level of the general staff of the police, they're called Nitzavim in Hebrew, which I think is inspector general in the United States. It's like a major general rank equivalent in police forces. They all quit. And then the new superintendent gets to choose his new chiefs that are going to be serving under him. So that's what's been happening over the past couple of weeks. So you have all of these lower, the second tier heads of the Israel police are resigning, and he's bringing in new talent to replace them. This happens as a matter of course every time. And so the problem for the left, and what's making them deranged with worry, is that Itamar Ben-Gvir is the one making the appointments, because he's the minister who's in charge of the police. So you get this headline, this scare headline, "This is how democracies fall," and comparing Israel to Russia. Because, obviously, if Itamar Ben-Gvir chooses the police chiefs, then we're Russia because reasons. Anyway, so that's what the left is saying. But if you notice, what we're seeing is the alignment of what Amidor is talking about with the American intention to, with his claim that the Americans intend to sanction Itamar Ben-Gvir. And here is the Israeli media fingering him specifically as the enemy of democracy. And just for knowing, Yediot Ahronot has been the house paper for the Kaplan Brigade since the outset of the anti-government riots that began, like in January of 2022. So we're talking about a system, and it's a crazy system, right? Israel, this morning I woke up, I don't know if I woke up. Yeah, I woke up. My alarm was set for 6:30, and I was lying in bed, and boom, I heard these booms. It sounded like thunder. And I thought we were under attack. I wasn't sure whether it was thunder, which didn't make any sense because we haven't had rain yet, or if it were missiles that were falling somewhere nearby. Just we didn't get the sirens in our town because they weren't in our direct vicinity. So that's what I thought had happened at 6:30. And then it worked out that it was this Houthi missile that fell, I think like 45 kilometers away from my house, right? And I heard it from my bedroom window. So, this was, whatever it was an extremely powerful blast, because, maybe I heard the attempt to intercept the missile. Maybe that's what I heard. But the point is that whatever it was a very powerful missile. And they had debris that, went out for kilometers. So this was a big deal that happened this morning in Tel Aviv, right? Or the area, it's actually the vicinity of Lod. But whatever the case may be, so this just happened this morning from Yemen. We're having daily dozens, more than 100, I think 3 or 4 days in a row, we had over 100 projectiles falling on northern Israel. We have everything heating up in Judea and Samaria. And of course, we have Gaza, where we have to defeat Hamas. And on all of these fronts, you see this American system blocking Israeli victory. You have them coming out with Kamala Harris at the debate last week saying all Israel's allowed to do is catch missiles. It's killed too many people, right? Even though the ratio of dead terrorists to civilians is less than 1-to-1, the lowest in human history. We've killed too many. She's on their side. And then, you'd think we'd have a united front, but we don't, because the Israeli left is parroting, on the one hand, Hamas propaganda, calling for a total capitulation, but that's also American propaganda. And then you have this guy, Amidor, going to Washington and giving this report about how the Americans are wanting to sanction a member of the cabinet and senior officers. And then the next morning, or 3 days, what is it? Today's the 15th, so 5 days after he posts his thing, you have the lead headline in Yediot Ahronot saying that Itamar Ben-Gvir is killing Israeli democracy. And it's very hard to avoid seeing the connections because these people have been working together for forever. And, this is crazy that this is the United States' response to this existential threat to Israel's existential threat to Israel's existence, to the war for its survival that we're forced to wage against this system of enemy forces that is controlled completely by Iran, which the United States is trying to appease. But that's where we are on the eve of the American election, right? That the United States is working with the Israeli left. Their response to this war for our survival is to oust the government of Israel. That's what's happening. It's shocking. It's appalling. But it's our reality. And hopefully, just by shining a light on it, will make somebody, God willing, come to their senses or at least get some pushback in Washington for all of this. Those are my thoughts. I'm flying out tonight for a week. I'll try to give you some updates during my travel. If I don't, I'll see you next week. And if I do, I'll see you in a couple of days. Take care.